Aya.
Hare
Om
Krishna, Hare
Namo
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare
Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shilakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Mukam karoti vachalam pangam langayate girim yat kripa tamham vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Harihi Om. Okay, we're reading from Canto 1, Chapter 13, Text 49. Actually, we think we already done 49. We're reading from 50. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Gurudev, Jai Srila Prabhupada. The Lord has already performed his duties to help the demigods and he is awaiting the rest. You Pandavas may wait as long as the Lord is here on the earth. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The Lord descends from his abode Krishna Loka, the topmost planet in the spiritual sky, in order to help the demigod administrators to this material world when they are greatly vexed by the asuras, who are envious not only of the Lord but also of his devotees. As referred to above, the conditioned living beings contact material association by their own choice, dictated by a strong desire to lord it over the competition against such imitation gods. And such competitors are generally known as asuras. When there are too many asuras in the world, then it becomes a hell for those who are devotees of the Lord. Due to the growth of asuras, the mass of people who are generally devoted to the Lord by nature and the pure devotees of the Lord, including the demigods and higher planets, pray to the Lord for relief. And the Lord either descends personally from his abode or deputes some of his devoted devotees to remodel the fallen conditions of the human society or even animal society. Such disruptions take place not only in human society but also amongst animals, birds, and other living beings, including the demigods in the higher planets. Lord Shri Krishna descends personally to vanquish asuras like Kamsa, Jarasandha, and Shishupala. And during the reign of Maharaj Yudhishthir, amongst all the asuras were killed by the Lord. Now he was awaiting the annihilation of his own dynasty called the Yadu Vamsha, who appeared by his will in this world. He wanted to take them away before his own departure to his eternal abode. Narada, like Virudura, did not disclose the imminent annihilation of Yadu dynasty, but indirectly gave a hint to the king and his brother to wait till the incident happened and the Lord departed. Text 51. O king, Krishna, Krishna. Your uncle Dhritarashtra, his brother Vidura, and his wife Gandhari have gone to the southern side of the Himalaya mountains, where they are shelters of the great sages. Srila Prabhupada's purport to pacify the mourning Maharaj Yudhishthir, Narada first of all spoke the philosophical point of view, and then he began to describe the future movements of his uncle, which he could see by his foreseeing powers, and thus began to describe as follows. 52. The place is called Saptor Saptashrota, Saptashrota divided by 7, because there are waters of the sacred Ganga were divided into 7 branches. This was done for the satisfaction of the 7 great rishis. Text 53. On the bank of Saptashrota actually. Sapt is 7, Shrot is the where water comes from. This is the source. Shrot is source. Dhritarashtra is now engaged in beginning Ashtanga Yoga by bathing 3 times daily in the morning, noon, and evening, by performing the Agnihotra sacrifice with fire, and by drinking only water. This helps one control the mind, the senses, and free one completely from thoughts of familial affection. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The yoga system is a mechanical way to control the senses and the mind and divert them from matter to spirit. The preliminary processes are the sitting posture, meditation, spiritual thoughts, manipulation of air passing within the body, the gradual situation in trance facing the absolute person, Paramatma, such mechanical ways of apprising the spiritual platform prescribes some regulative principles of taking bath daily 3 times, fasting as far as possible, sitting and concentrating the mind on spiritual matters, and thus gradually becoming free from Vishaya or material objects. Material existence means to be absorbed in the material objective, which is simply illusory. House, country, family, society, children, property, and business are some of the material coverings of the spirit, Atma, and the yoga system helps one to become free from all the illusory thoughts and gradually turn towards the absolute person, Paramatma. By material association, education, we simply learn to concentrate on flimsy things, but yoga is the process of forgetting them altogether. Modern so called yogis and yoga systems manifest some magical feats, and ignorant person are attached to such false things, or they accept the yoga system as cheap healing process for disease of the gross body. But factually, the yoga system is the process of learning to forget what we have acquired through the struggle of existence. Dhritarashtra was all along engaged in improving family affairs by raising the standards of the living of his sons. 1 second, I have to see if I'm on mute. No. Okay. Dhritarashtra was all along engaged in improving family affairs by raising the standard of his living of his sons, or by uprising usurping the property of the Pandavas for the sake of his own sons. These are common affairs for a man grossly materialistic and without knowledge of the spiritual force. He does not see how this can drag one from heaven to hell. By the grace of his younger brother Vidura, Dhritarashtra was enlightened and could see his grossly illusory engagements, and by such enlightenment he was able to leave home for spiritual realization. Sri Narada Deva was just foretelling the way of his spiritual progress in a palace which was sanctified by the flow of the celestial Ganges. Drinking water only without solid food is also considerable fasting. This is necessary for advancement of spiritual knowledge. A foolish man wants to be a cheap yogi without observing the regulative principles. A man who has no control over the tongue at first can hardly become a yogi. Yogi and bhogi are two opposite terms. The bhogi, or the merry man who eats and drinks, cannot be a yogi. For a yogi is never allowed to eat and drink unrestrictedly. We may note with profit how this Dhritarashtra began his yoga system by drinking water only and sitting calmly in place with spiritual atmosphere, deeply absorbed in the thoughts of the Lord Hari, the personality of Godhead. Text 54. One who has controlled the sitting posture, yogic asana, and the breathing process can turn the senses towards the absolute personality of Godhead and thus immune to contaminations of the modes of material nature, namely mundane goodness, passion, and ignorance. Shri Prabhupada. The preliminary activities of the way of yoga are asana, pranayam, pratyahara. Okay. Asana, pranayam. Okay. Pratyahara, dhyana, dharana, etc. Maharaj Dhritarashtra was to attain such in those preliminary actions because he was seated in sanctified place and was concentrating upon one object, namely the Supreme Personality of Godhead Hari. Thus, all his senses were being engaged in the service of the Lord. This process directly helps the devotee to get freedom from the contaminations of the three modes of material nature. Even the highest mode, the material mode of goodness, is also the cause of bondage, and what to speak of the other qualities, namely passion and ignorance. Passion and ignorance increase the material propensities of hankering for material enjoyment, and the strong sense of lust provokes the accumulation of wealth and power. Passion and ignorance. Okay. One who has conquered these two base mentalities and has raised himself to the platform goodness, which is full of knowledge and mortality, cannot also control the senses, namely eyes, the tongue, the nose, the ear, and touch. But one who has surrendered himself onto the lotus feet of Lord Hari, as above mentioned, can transcend all influence of the modes of material nature and be fixed in the service of the Lord. The Bhakti Yoga process therefore directly applies the senses to the loving service of the Lord. This prohibits the performer from engaging in material activities. This process of turning the senses from material attachment to the loving transcendental service of the Lord is called pratyahara, and the very process is called pranayam. Pranayama, ultimately ending in samadhi or absorption in the pleasing the Supreme Lord Hari by all means. Text 55. Dhritarashtra will have to eliminate his pure identity with intelligence and then merge into the Supreme Being with knowledge of his qualitative oneness as a living entity with the Supreme Brahman, being freed from the blocked sky. He will have to rise to spiritual sky. Shivapad's purport, the living being, by his desiring to lord it over the material world and declining to cooperate with the Supreme Lord, contacts the sum total of the material world, namely Mahat Tattva. Okay. Contacts the living being by design to lord of the material world and by declining the cooperate with Krishna. Contacts the sum total of the material world, namely Mahatattva. Okay. And from Mahatattva is false identity with the material world, intelligence, mind, and senses is developed. This covers his pure spiritual identity. By the yogic process, when his pure identity is realized in self-realization, one has to revert to the original position by al- amalag- amalgamating. Amalgamating का मतलब, what's the meaning of this? Krishna. Process of uniting, merging, or blending two or more entities. Okay. Original position by amalgamating the five gross elements and the subtle elements, mind and intelligence, into the Mahatattva. Okay. Thus, getting freed from the clutches of Mahatattva, he has to merge in the existence of the Supersoul. In other words, he has to realize that qualitatively he is non different from the Supersoul, and thus he transcends the material sky by his pure development of spiritual identity, which was attained by Dhritarashtra by the grace of Vidura and the Lord. The Lord's mercy was bestowed upon him by his personal contact with Vidura. And when he was actually practicing the instructions of Vidura, the Lord helped him to attain the highest professional stage. A pure devotee of the Lord does not live on any planet of the material sky, nor does he feel any contact with the material elements. His so-called material body does not exist. Being surcharged with the spiritual currents of the Lord's identical interest, thus he is permanently freed from all contaminations of the sum total of Mahatattva. He is always in the spiritual sky, which he attains by being transcendental to the sevenfold material coverings by the effect of devotional service. The conditioned souls are within the coverings, whereas the liberated soul is beyond, far beyond the covering. The conditioned soul are within the covering. Okay. Text 56. He will have to suspend all the actions of the senses, even from outside, and will have to be impervious to interactions of the senses which are influenced by the modes of material nature. After renouncing all material duties, he must become immovably established beyond all sources of hindrances on the path. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Dhritarashtra had attained by the yogic process the stage of negation of all sorts of material reaction. The effects of the material modes of nature draw the victim to indefatigable desires of enjoying matter, but one can escape such false enjoyment by the yogic process. Every sense is always busy in search for its food, and thus the conditioned soul is assaulted with from all sides and has no chance to become steady in any pursuit. Maharaj Yudhishthira was advised by Narada not to disturb his uncle by attempting to bring him back home. He was now beyond the attraction of anything material. The material modes of nature, the gunas, have their different modes of activities, but above the material modes of nature is a spiritual mode, which is absolute. Nirguna means without reaction. The spiritual mode and its effect are identical. Therefore, the spiritual quality is distinguished from material counterpart by the word nirguna. After complete suspension of the material modes of nature, one is admitted to the spiritual sphere, and action dictated by the spiritual mode is called devotional service or bhakti. Bhakti is therefore nirguna, attained by direct contact of the absolute. 57. O king, he will quit his body, most probably on the fifth day of today, and his body will turn to ashes. Srila Prabhupada's puppet. Narad Muni's prophecy prohibited Yudhishthir Maharaj from going to the place where his uncle was staying, because even after quitting the body by his own mystic power, Dhritarashtra would not be in need of any funeral ceremony. Narad Muni indicated his body by itself would burn to ashes. The perfection of yoga system is attained by such mystic power. The yogi is able to quit his own body by his own choice of time and can attain any planet he desires by turning the present body into ashes, a self made fire. Text 58. While outside observing her husband, who will burn in the fire of mystic power along with the thatched cottage, his chaste wife will enter the fire with rapt attention. Shipapad's puppet. Gandhari was an ideal chaste wife, a life companion for her husband, and therefore, when she saw her husband burning in the fire of mystic yoga along with the cottage's leaves, she despaired. She left home after losing 100 sons, and in the forest, she saw that her most beloved husband was also burning. Now she actually felt alone, and therefore she entered fire of her husband and followed her husband to death. This entering of the chase leading into the fire of her dead husband is called sati rite, and the action is considered to be an most perfect for a woman. In the later age, the sati rite became an obnoxious criminal affair because the ceremony was forced upon even an unwilling women. In this fallen age, it is not possible for any lady to follow the sati rite as chastely as it was done by Gandhari and others in the past age. A chaste wife like Gandhari would feel the separation of her husband to be more burning than actual fire. Such a lady can observe the sati right voluntarily, but there is no criminal force by anyone. Then, when the rite became formality only, the force was applied upon a lady to follow the principle. Actually, it became criminal, and therefore the ceremony was to be stopped by state law. The prophecy of Narad Muni to Yudhishthir Maharaj forbade him to go with his widowed aunt. 659. Vidura being affected by the delight and grief, and will then leave the place of sacred pilgrimage. Shripapad's purport. Vidura was astonished to see the marvelous departure of his brother Dhritarashtra as a liberated yogi, for in the past life he was much attached to materialism. Of course, it was only due to Vidura that his brother attained the desired goal of life. Vidura was therefore glad to learn about it, but he was sorry that he could not make his brother turn into a pure devotee. This was not done by Vidura because of Dhritarashtra being inimical towards Pandavas, who are all devotees of the Lord. An offense, okay, this is important. So, an offense at the feet of Vaishnava is more dangerous than an offense at the lotus feet of the Lord. Vidura was certainly very liberal to bestow mercy upon Dhritarashtra, whose past life was very materialistic. Okay, maybe I have a offense. Vidura was certainly very liberal to bestow mercy upon his brother Dhritarashtra, whose past life was very materialistic. But ultimately, the result of such mercy certainly depend on the will of the Supreme Lord in the present life. Therefore, Dhritarashtra attained liberation only, and after many such liberated states of life, one can attain the stage of devotional service. Vidura was certainly very mortified by the death of his brother and sister-in-law, and the only remedy to mitigate such lamentation was to go out to pilgrimage. Thus, Maharaj Yudhishthira had no chance to call back Vidura, his surviving uncle. Text 16. Having spoken thus, the great sage Narada, along with his Veena, ascended into outer space. Yudhishthira kept his instructions in the heart and so was able to get rid of all lamentation. Srila Prabhupada's puppet, Sri Naraji is an eternal spaceman, Having and endowed with a spiritual body by the grace of the Lord, he can travel in outer spaces of both the material and spiritual worlds without restriction and can approach any planet in the ultimate space within no time. We have already discussed his previous life as a son of maidservant. Because of his association with pure devotees, he was elevated to the position of an eternal spaceman, and thus he had freedom of movement. One should therefore try to follow in the footsteps of Narad Muni and not to make a futile effort to reach other planets of mechanical means. Maharaj Yudhishthira was a pious king, and therefore he could see Narad Muni occasionally. Anyone who desired to see Narad Muni must first be pious and follow in the footsteps of Narad Muni. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purpose of first canto, 13th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Dhritarashtra Quits Home. Harishanam. Chapter 14, Dhritarashtra Quits Home. मेरे को टाइम लगेगा। Uh, okay, maybe we'll continue from chapter 13 tomorrow. Uh, how much time did we leave? Around 20 minutes. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Jai Shri Gurudev, Jai Shri Prabhupada.